Everything began on that fateful day. Tomorrow would be New Year's Eve and Kang had just returned home, facing yet another job rejection. As usual, his sister began to berate him immediately. "Why can't you land a job? How long must I support you?" Exhausted and overwhelmed by his circumstances, Kang, who was both depressed and slightly intoxicated, could only spin his head in frustration before retreating to his bed, his sister's scolding fading into the background. As he lay there, self-doubt crept in. Was he really such a failure? With these heavy thoughts, he drifted into sleep, hoping for a brighter day. However, at the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve, a sinister voice whispered in his ear, jolting him awake. He found himself in a boundless white room, unable to grasp the situation. Words materialized before him, and the eerie voice announced the start of a tutorial. Confused, Kang wondered if this was a kidnapping or a cruel prank. Yet fear soon gave way to a strange solace when he realized he was likely dreaming. Embracing this notion, Kang felt a rare moment of joy amidst his real-life sorrows. A dream was a welcome respite. But his brief relief was shattered when the voice declared the commencement of Stage 1. He had to cross a bridge to reach a designated point. Failure meant death. This dream, Kang realized, might just be another kind of nightmare. Kang began to comprehend the seriousness of his predicament, yet the specifics eluded him. What bridge? What depth was the voice referring to? Abruptly, he found himself transported to a dark cave. Gazing around, he recoiled in shock. The ground beneath him groaned ominously, and several narrow stone bridges stretched out before him. He wasn't alone. Numerous people milled around, equally bewildered, as molten lava bubbled threateningly below them. A single misstep could mean the end. The sight and sounds of the bubbling lava unnerved Kang profoundly. Could this really be just a dream? The vividness of his senses betrayed the typical haziness of dreams. Doubting the reality he faced, he surveyed the crowd. Everyone looked just as startled and fearful as he felt. What sort of absurd dream is this? Kang pondered aloud, struggling to piece together the scene. Suddenly, a familiar voice called his name. Turning, he was stunned to see his sister on the same precarious bridge, tears streaming down her face. The sight of her in such peril deepened Kang's anxiety. "Why on earth are you in my first dream of the year?" he blurted out, bewildered. "This is ridiculous," she responded, equally shocked. "I was about to ask you the same thing. What are you doing in my dream?" Her voice trembled, mixing fear with confusion. Everything seemed far too vivid to be imaginary. But Kang dismissed his sister's fears with a stern tone. "Don't pretend this is your dream, it's clearly mine," he insisted, though this only intensified his sister's distress. She retorted, her voice rising over the ominous setting. "Is this really the time to argue over whose dream we're in?" The intense heat from the lava and the vivid sensations made Kang question whether this could truly be a dream. Moreover, he wondered how it was possible to engage in such fluid conversation within a dream. However, Kang, often lacking in sense, suggested that the mind could easily be deceived. People claim they don't feel pain in dreams, but that's not true, he argued. He recounted an incident where he dreamt of urinating only to awaken and find his blanket untouched, a fact he embarrassingly shared with his sister. Annoyed, his sister rebuked him. "Great, that's just what I needed to hear." Unperturbed, Kang dismissed her irritation. "It doesn't matter, it's my dream," he declared, and began to advance across the bridge, eager to explore this surreal experience further. Ju-hee, his sister, was taken aback by his foolishness. "Where do you think you're going?" she called out. With a mocking tone, Kang replied, "Didn't you see the system notification? It said we have to reach the other side of the bridge to clear the level," he added, smugly. "But I suppose an NPC like you wouldn't know that." Frustrated by being referred to as an NPC, Ju-hee admitted she had heard the notification but questioned Kang's fearlessness. "Aren't you scared of falling?" she asked. Kang brushed off her concerns. "Why be scared? It's just a dream," he scoffed. "Even if I fall and die, what difference would it make?" But before he could finish his thought, a shadow loomed above. They watched in horror as a person trying to cross the bridge above lost their footing and plummeted into the lava, screaming as they burned. The sight of the person disintegrating in the molten rock, emitting a nauseating burnt odor, was ghastly. The siblings stood in stunned silence, witnessing the excruciating death. The shock left Kang breathless. After a moment, his sister, observing his pale, shaken expression, pressed, "What were you saying?" Kang, visibly trembling, struggled to respond. His earlier bravado evaporated with the harrowing scene. The scream had sounded alarmingly realistic. "I'm not scared at all," Kang asserted, but his voice faltered with fear. Observing this, his sister sighed deeply, then crouched and advised him, "If you're that frightened, follow my lead and crawl." With that, she began to inch forward cautiously. Kang, visibly shaken, attempted to maintain his bravado. Scared? Me? Never, he stammered. Yet the idea of crawling like his sister seemed increasingly sensible. Reluctantly, Kang lowered himself and started to crawl. Time passed, and the scene showed various fates unfolding. Some progressed, while others perished. Kang and his sister continued their cautious advance. Though she was frightened, she hid her fears from her timid brother. What do you think happened to them? Any idea? She asked Kang, trying to gauge his thoughts. It's just a very realistic nightmare, Kang replied stubbornly. Still stuck on that, his sister challenged, her voice growing stern. Do you really think a dream this vivid is just a dream? There's something more at play here. What if dying here means dying in real life too? These words overwhelmed Kang, and he broke down, sobbing loudly. You witch! Why must you keep reminding me? He cried out in despair. I'm paralyzed with fear here. The notion that death here could mirror death in reality terrified him, causing him to shake uncontrollably. Observing this, his sister mused silently on his unreliability as an older brother. Defeated, Kang lay there, immobilized by his dread. I'll just rest here a bit before continuing, he muttered. He forced a smile and added, You know, it's still possible this is all just a dream, and maybe when we wake up it'll all be gone. But before he could finish, the same eerie voice resonated around them, cutting through the tense air. The announcement came. A set amount of time had elapsed since the tutorial began, and no player had yet completed it. Consequently, the difficulty level was about to increase. As the voice faded, a loud crackling sound echoed throughout the area. Startled by this, Kang and his sister felt a surge of fear. Abruptly, the bridge behind Kang began to crumble, not just his, but all the bridges. Panic ensued as everyone started to run. Half of them fell, while the others pressed on. Terrified to his core, Kang froze in place until his sister's urgent shout broke through his paralysis. Run fast or you'll die. Galvanized by her words, Kang scrambled to his feet and began to run, though still gripped by fear. He reassured himself as he moved, It's okay. The bridge isn't too narrow. Just don't trip and keep looking straight ahead. Focus on the path. As he raced across the disintegrating bridge, he eventually glimpsed the end, sparking a flicker of hope. He believed that reaching the end might signify the end of this nightmare. However, a sudden crackling sound drew his attention to his left, where he saw his sister nearing the end of her bridge. Just as the ceiling above her began to crumble, he shouted her name, but it was already too late for warnings. Driven by instinct, Kang leaped towards her bridge. In a burst of adrenaline, he grabbed her, and without a moment's hesitation, they both jumped from the collapsing structure, landing safely at the end of the bridge. Their timely escape was crucial. A second's delay would have been catastrophic. Before they could even catch their breath, the same voice filled the air once more, congratulating them on clearing the first stage of the tutorial 1 of 8. Simultaneously, a notification appeared, informing them of a level up and the temporary awakening of their powers, which would fully manifest upon completion of the tutorial. Kang paid little attention to the notification. He simply lay there, exhaling a sigh of relief, and confessed that he couldn't move a finger anymore. Juhi, on the other hand, scrutinized the system notification with intense curiosity, her face a mask of focus. Kang, frustrated, shouted, Forget all that. Aren't you even going to thank me for saving your life? Juhi muttered a casual thank you, which left Kang feeling somewhat underappreciated. Just a casual thank you, really. Meanwhile, Juhi was puzzled by something else entirely. What in the world is this temporarily awakened status? She wondered aloud, studying her status window. Her level had increased to 1. Her attributes included strength at 7, agility at 12, vitality at 6, and magic power at 13. Most intriguingly, her skill was listed as calm, which might explain her composure in such a frantic scenario. When Kang overheard the term system window, his interest was piqued. Is this the system window? I think it is. Despite his exhaustion, he managed to access his own system window. To his astonishment, his skill was resurrection, but before he could explore further, he awoke with a scream, drenched in sweat. Sitting in silence, he absorbed the surreal experience, realizing he was back in his own room, and it was morning. Was that really just a dream, he wondered, grappling with the vividness of the experience. Soon it was revealed that this bizarre phenomenon had spread globally. Almost half the population had experienced the same dream standing on a lava bridge, needing to complete a specific level. The world plunged into chaos, yet one commonality emerged: every person who had the dream was aged between 18 and 40 years old. After a while, Juhi burst into Kang's room, screaming at the top of her lungs. Both of them, overtaken by nerves and panic, started to babble about their experiences. Catching his breath, Kang fired off a series of questions. Juhi had appeared in his dream. He had nearly died. What was that all about? Especially the status window? Equally flustered, Juhi launched into her own inquiries. They quickly descended into an argument. Juhi pointed out that she had been on the brink of death, and Kang had saved her. Their conversation sped up, becoming so fast and frenetic that they couldn't make out each other's words. Eventually Juhi, overwhelmed, shouted, "At least let me speak first." Kang, already agitated, snapped back, accusing her of being the interrupter. "Let me speak first." Their typical sibling bickering spiraled until they both exhausted themselves and retreated to opposite corners of the room. Hunger eventually interrupted their standoff. Deciding to eat first and sort out their thoughts later, they sat down for a meal. Meanwhile, the internet was ablaze with talk of the apocalypse, realistic and shared dreams, and various doomsday theories. As they ate, Kang and Juhi finally managed to converse without shouting. They came to realize that their experience wasn't merely a dream. They had actually interacted with each other in a tangible way. Moreover, this phenomenon wasn't isolated to their country. It appeared that people worldwide had experienced the same dream. Kang stumbled upon some intriguing news. Reports indicated that, although 3 to 4 out of 10 people had died in the dream, they hadn't actually died in real life. Juhi, however, remained skeptical. She argued that even if they didn't physically die, the intense realism of dying in the lava could have lasting psychological effects, potentially scarring them for life. Juhi had read online that those who died in the dream were admitted to mental hospitals, severely traumatized by the experience. They continued their meal in silence until a loud commotion outside disrupted the quiet. Kang went to investigate and was met with utter chaos. People were panicking, some looting stores for food, others parading with religious icons, convinced of the world's impending doom. Crime was rampant as opportunists took advantage of the disorder. Amid this turmoil, Juhi knew it was impossible to go to work, and Kang had no intention of job hunting in such chaos. Internally, Kang felt a guilty relief. He no longer had to worry about finding a job, even contemplating if the world might indeed be on the brink of ending. Curious, Kang asked Juhi if she had tried to open her status window in the real world. She hadn't, but when she did, a message appeared, counting down to a cataclysmic event in nearly 5 years and 4 years, 364 days, 17 hours, 3 minutes, and 13 seconds. A disaster will strike that will end the world. Juhi panicked, asking, "What do we do now?" Kang nonchalantly replied, "The world's going to end in 5 years. Why stress about it now? We're better off staying home and figuring out what's going on with this tutorial guy." For once, Juhi thought Kang was making sense. As the world gradually regained a semblance of order, with the police curbing the chaos and people finding their way back to normalcy, night fell, and they all retired to bed. As Kang drifted off to sleep, the same mysterious voice greeted him once more, offering an explanation and instructions for basic interference. Annoyed, Kang dismissed the preamble, demanding, "Skip all this and just show me my status window." The system obliged, displaying his stats: level 1, strength at 8, agility at 9, stamina at 8, magic power at 14, and his unique ability, resurrection. Kang wasn't sure about the effectiveness of his stats since he had only his own as a reference. His magic power stood out, notably higher than his other attributes, suggesting a potential proficiency in magic. However, what truly astonished him was his unique ability, resurrection. He smirked, considering it an overpowered, game-changing skill. Reading the details, he discovered his resurrection rank was Z, allowing him to come back to life 24 hours after death. If no specific location was designated, he would resurrect at his last sleeping spot. But there was a catch, though. His level would drop by 1, and all abilities would be halved for 24 hours, penalties that were suspended in the tutorial. Elated, Kang danced around, thrilled by what he deemed a god-level cheat ability. Finally, he thought, a chance to escape my loser life. Unbeknownst to him, challenges awaited. The scene shifted to Kang, wielding a hefty hammer, battling an elusive goblin. Despite his fervent swings, the goblin deftly evaded him. The objective of the second stage was clear: eliminate all goblins. Yet Kang struggled to conquer even one. After a prolonged struggle, he managed to slay it only by launching a surprise attack, leaving goblin blood dripping gruesomely from its head. Kang's hands trembled. He was drenched in the vile blood, recoiling at the reality that he had actually killed. The sight was so nauseating that he had to turn away. As he retreated, Kang was unaware of the danger lurking behind. A particularly menacing goblin named Goblin Millet, larger and more formidable than the rest, eyed him hungrily. This goblin, distinct from the others, was ready for a fight, wielding a 2-meter-long weapon, a menacing meat chopper aimed at Kang. Upon seeing the towering goblin millet, Kang was petrified. He had barely managed to defeat a smaller goblin, and now faced this behemoth wielding a 2-meter weapon. The thought alone terrified him. I definitely don't want that thing anywhere near me. Yet the burly goblin had other plans. Goblin Millet burst into maniacal laughter, drool cascading from his mouth as if he were about to devour Kang whole. He swung his massive meat chopper, and Kang, weak from lack of exercise and equipped with a mere 70-centimeter weapon, stood no chance of blocking it. Overwhelmed, Kang burst into tears. The goblin easily knocked Kang's weapon aside with a single blow and didn't immediately finish him off. Instead, he cruelly toyed with Kang, methodically tearing at his body and subjecting him to unimaginable torment. Repulsed by the thought, Kang was left battered, half dead, and tearful. Bloodied and barely conscious, he felt the goblin's grip tighten around his neck as he was dragged away, the goblin's laughter ringing in his ears. Kang was lost in agony, questioning why this torment was happening to him. The pain was hellish, and he couldn't fathom why the goblin didn't just end his life. All Kang could do was hope fervently to awaken from this horrific nightmare soon. Yet, as the ordeal dragged on, he was cruelly reminded of just how much blood the human body contains. The monstrous, bloodthirsty goblin Millet continued his dreadful antics, leaving Kang in a state of despair. After tormenting Kang mercilessly, the goblin dragged him for hours by the collar to an unknown location. Throughout this ordeal, Kang suffered excruciating pain and hellish torture. At last they arrived at a place where 3 more goblins joined in, subjecting Kang to further brutal treatment that ultimately led to his death from blood loss and severe torture. He awoke in his own bed, screaming uncontrollably. His cries roused his sister Juhi, who was initially angry and frustrated by the disturbance. Bursting into his room, she demanded, "What's all this noise about so early in the morning? Why are you screaming like a madman at 4 a.m.? Her head throbbed with pain, exacerbated by the lack of sleep. However, her frustration turned to shock when she saw Kang, curled up in the corner of his bed, trembling under a blanket, scratching at his arms frantically. All he could stammer was, "Goblins, I'm scared, please, no more." Both shocked and confused by his state, eventually managed to coax him to the dining table, though he continued to shiver uncontrollably. There, Kang shared his harrowing experience, detailing how he had bled to death, but he withheld the worst of the atrocities to spare his sister the full horror. He relayed only the beginning. The goblin had methodically pulled out his fingernails and toenails, crushed his fingers, and then proceeded to extract his teeth one by one. Upon hearing this, Juhai could listen no more. She covered her ears, exclaiming, "I can't hear any more of this, I'll faint." She then mentioned that she, too, had failed to complete Stage 2, but had experienced nothing as horrific. Juhi had perished from a mere shock delivered by a standard goblin and wondered if Kang's tears were for a similar reason. Kang felt a wave of shame wash over him for having cried in front of his younger sister. In a bid to defend himself, he stood on his chair and shouted, "You can't understand because you haven't been through what I have." Even Mike Tyson would be yelling louder than me, and probably running to his mom. Realizing her teasing had struck a nerve, sought to calm him, saying, "It's okay. I was just trying to lighten the mood, and it seems to have worked. Seeing you shout like that, I guess you're okay now." Then she added, "But don't you think you need to see a doctor?" Confused, Kang replied. Hospital Juhi explained that news had spread globally about the traumatic effects of goblin attacks in the dream, with psychiatric wards seeing a 10-fold increase in patients, yet none seemed as deeply affected as Kang. Trying to maintain his pride, Kang retorted, "I'm not that weak. I'm a man, and men don't feel pain." Juhi cringed at his bravado, but then shared some encouraging news reports indicated that those who died in the tutorial wouldn't experience the dream again the next day. Relieved, Kang thought to himself, "Finally, I'll be able to sleep peacefully tonight." However, as he drifted off that night, the familiar voice greeted him again, announcing, "Kang's special ability, Resurrection, has been activated. The tutorial will start again for him." At that moment, Kang felt as if his world had shattered. The breath left his body, and he began to scream, cursing the creators of this merciless system. After an hour of expressing his fury, the system informed him that since he was within the tutorial zone, he wouldn't face any penalties for dying. Despite this, Kang was deeply shaken. He had spent the previous 8 hours awake, believing that waking up in the real world meant he had escaped the nightmare, only to find himself ensnared once again. Even after 8 hours, Kang's situation remained unchanged. He had slept in the tutorial zone, only to awaken in the same grim setting. Trapped for 2 days, he realized his only escape routes were to either complete the level or die. Yet death was a temporary respite, it merely reset the ordeal for the next day. This relentless cycle edged Kang toward a mental breakdown. Eventually resigning himself to his fate, Kang rose and surveyed the array of weapons before him. This time he armed himself with a crossbow for long-range attacks and a heavier weapon for close combat. Confident in his marksmanship from childhood, he boasted, "Let me show you. I used to be a great shot as a kid." He took aim at the thick goblin's forehead, but his arrow merely grazed its cheek, failing to inflict any damage. The goblin, noticing Kang, began to drool menacingly. Knowing the horrors that awaited if he were caught again, Kang quickly seized a spear for defense. The length of the spear allowed him to easily dispatch a smaller goblin. Elated by his success, he soon found his triumph short-lived as the spear became lodged in the goblin's bones. Struggling to free it, Kang was caught off guard as the thick goblin approached and crushed his skull, killing him instantly. Kang awoke once more, clutching his chest and gasping for air, yet this time he felt an odd sense of relief. His death had been swift, sparing him the extended agony of torture. As the third day dawned, Kang found himself back in the same dreaded place, facing the relentless challenge anew. The system announced the commencement of Stage 2, a notification Kang had grown thoroughly tired of hearing. Frustrated, he even threatened, "If you say that one more time, I'll shut down the system myself." This time, Kang didn't charge at the goblins recklessly. Realizing his own inadequacy, he remembered watching videos of professional fighters on YouTube and decided to employ a new strategy. Armed with a shield and a sword, he approached the goblins cautiously. Yet, despite his preparations, he was swiftly defeated. Kang awoke screaming, his frustration boiling over. Clutching his head, he shrieked like a man possessed, swearing to annihilate every goblin next time. The intensity of his vow made it seem as if the spirit of a legendary goblin slayer had taken hold of him. Juhi, hearing the commotion, came to check on him. Observing Kang's manic repetition, "I'll kill you. I'll kill every goblin .. She mused that if one screw in his mind had been loose before, now the entire mechanism had unraveled. By the 5th day, Kang had recognized that mere videos weren't enough, he needed practical experience. So he began practicing with his sword right where he respawned, swinging tirelessly for hours. His efforts eventually bore fruit, as the system notified him that his stamina had increased by 1 point. Encouraged but physically spent, Kang pushed himself to the brink of exhaustion. Disappointed by the modest gain after such relentless effort, he thought, "All this for just 1 point in stamina? This is unjust." Remembering an additional stat point he had yet to allocate, he invested it in his strength. Now slightly stronger and more enduring, Kang felt a surge of renewed confidence. He let out a fierce battle cry as he charged the goblin once more, but despite his improved abilities, the goblin dispatched him with a single devastating blow. Kang awoke screaming, a routine that had become disturbingly familiar. For the next 10 to 15 days, he returned to the tutorial zone with relentless determination. He engaged in strenuous physical training, performing push-ups and honing his swordsmanship, enhancing his stats in the process. Whenever fatigue overwhelmed him, he allowed the goblins to defeat him swiftly, using death as a temporary escape to the real world. However, this grueling regimen began to erode his mental stability. Just as Kang teetered on the edge of a mental breakdown, the system notified him that he had achieved basic swordsmanship at level F. Surprised, Kang learned that this skill level was typically associated with local thugs, a rudimentary proficiency, but a start nonetheless. Details were the least of his concerns. Acquiring any skill at all brought him a surge of satisfaction. With sword in hand, something within Kang transformed. His eyes blazed red, and a ferocious, uncontrollable rage consumed him. "Today I will eliminate every single goblin," he vowed, his voice resonating through the cave with a blend of fury and desperation. Despite what felt like weeks of effort, in reality, only 7 days had elapsed. During this time, Kang had made significant progress. He discovered there were only 5 goblins in the Zone 4, relatively weak ones, which he had managed to dispatch individually, and the formidable, thick goblin, his primary adversary. Now standing face to face with this daunting opponent, Kang evaded an attack from the goblin's meat chopper using his shield. The battle-hardened Kang was now adept at anticipating and countering the goblin's moves. With a grim expression, he activated his newly acquired basic swordsmanship skills in an attempt to decapitate the goblin. However, his attack merely left a superficial scratch on the goblin's face. Exhaustion from battling the 4 lesser goblins had taken its toll, and now, after engaging with the thick goblin, Kang was nearly depleted, trembling from sheer fatigue. Sensing Kang's fatigue, the thick goblin seized the opportunity, swinging his meat chopper with force, and sending Kang's sword clattering away. Surprised but agile, Kang narrowly avoided a crippling blow aimed at his leg. A smirk crossed Kang's face as he realized the goblin relished, not just defeating but torturing him. Through countless encounters, Kang had learned the goblin's attack patterns. It was clear the creature preferred capturing him alive for its cruel amusements. Armed with this knowledge, Kang saw his chance. He swiftly kicked mud into the goblin's face, momentarily blinding him with the stinging dirt. The goblin howled in pain, its cries echoing through the cave. Kang used this distraction to his advantage, grabbing a large stone and smashing it against the goblin's leg, effectively breaking it. The goblin writhed, swinging its weapon in blind agony. As the goblin staggered, Kang maneuvered behind him. By the time the goblin cleared his eyes, it was too late. Kang, fueled by a mix of adrenaline and revenge, roared, "I am the strongest, I am inevitable." He then smashed the stone into the goblin's face, causing a gruesome burst of blood from its nose and mouth. The goblin collapsed, quivering as it struggled for air, knocked unconscious by the ferocity of Kang's attack. Overcome with a savage joy, Kang congratulated himself on his victory, though the goblin was not yet dead. A sinister smile curled Kang's lips as he whispered chillingly, "I'm going to torture this beast as it tortured me," and with that, he exacted his revenge, ensuring the goblin's demise. As the goblin's life ebbed away, the system announced Kang's victory over Stage 2, rewarding him with 5 additional stat points and the choice of any weapon he desired. Raising his arms triumphantly, Kang looked skyward and declared, "This is the power of the ultimate being. Am I a god?" Kang mused, bursting into maniacal laughter. The scene then shifted to a more mundane setting. Kang, back at his sister's house, donned an apron and busied himself in the kitchen. Despite his triumphs in the tutorial, at home he was still the same old Kang, living at his sister's expense and tasked with daily cooking. He convinced himself he was preparing a celebratory meal for clearing Stage 2. In high spirits, he sampled the food, only to burn his mouth as Juhi burst through the door with a bang. Startled, Kang winced from the pain. Juhi, wide-eyed, asked, "Did you really clear Stage 2 before Kang could reply? A resounding noise shook the earth, announcing the completion of the tutorial. A new reality was unveiled. Those who had finished the tutorial could now harness their abilities in the real world. Both Kang and Juhi were astounded, but their astonishment escalated when another notification popped up, signaling the activation of a dungeon and causing the world to tremble. They rushed to the balcony and were greeted by an imposing, eerie black door just outside their home. The system clarified that this was a dungeon, accessible only to those who had cleared any tutorial level. As dungeons materialized globally, a countdown appeared, signaling 4 years, 3 days, 57 hours, 13 minutes, and 51 seconds until a full connection with the Heikin dimension was established. The emergence of the dungeon thrust the world into chaos, but Kang and Juhi chose to stay indoors, seeking organized, reliable information. During this search, Kang uncovered that the tutorial saga was far from over. A significant revelation came to light. Many people had just turned 18 that day and were initiating their tutorials. Thus, anyone reaching adulthood would face the tutorial, a daunting prospect. While the world outside unraveled, Kang, detached from the chaos, was eager to access his status window. With a flourish, he commanded, "Status window, open." After a suspenseful pause, the window appeared, only to inform him that the tutorial was still in progress, rendering it unusable. Confused, Kang then realized the broader scope of his challenge. There were a total of 8 tutorial stages. It had been 8 days since the tutorial first began for others, meaning they had completed it and gained full access to their powers. Kang, however, had more trials to face. Due to his resurrection ability, Kang found himself perpetually stuck in Stage 2, which meant he couldn't use his status window until he completed all 8 stages. Realizing this, Kang felt a wave of sadness wash over him. He turned to Juhi to see if she had found any information about Stage 3 online. Juhi reported that the tutorial was notoriously difficult, and very few people had advanced to Stage 3 or 4. Moreover, those who had were tight-lipped, unwilling to share their secrets and make it easier for others to gain power. Despite this setback, Kang flexed his biceps confidently and declared, "I don't need that information anyway. I'm a genius, and I'll breeze through Stage 3 just like that." But whether he could truly accomplish this remained to be seen. The scene then shifted to a surreal nighttime setting under a glowing moon. In the moonlight, a golden liquid shimmered as it cascaded down like a waterfall. However, it soon became clear that this was no waterfall, but rather a tribal man relieving himself, with the stream landing directly on Kang's face. Kang, clad in a ghillie suit, sat motionless as the urine trickled down onto his lips, fueling a growing rage within him. He seethed, "I will kill you. I will definitely make you pay." The narrative then rewound to 10 hours earlier when Kang first arrived at Stage 3. As he stepped into this new phase, the system greeted him and announced the stage's name, patience, and endurance test. The conditions were clear. Kang had to assassinate a Gurkhan chieftain without detection. The penalty for failure was death. Looking down, Kang noticed he was already equipped with a ghillie suit, setting the stage for his stealth mission. After assessing his situation, Kang realized he was embarking on a mission akin to those of a hitman or assassin. He was unfamiliar with the Gurkhan chieftain, so his initial task was to locate this elusive creature. However, before setting off, Kang decided to review the rewards he had earned from Stage 2. Upon accessing his status window, Kang discovered he had advanced from level 2 to level 4. His attributes had improved. Strength and agility were both rated at 10, stamina at 11, and magic at 14, with an additional 7 stat points to allocate. He also noted he had acquired 3 new skills: basic swordsmanship, basic shield technique, and basic crossbow technique. The elated Kang exclaimed, "I am so rich. This is exactly how a status window should look." Yet his joy was short-lived. Upon inspecting the details of his new skills, he realized they were nearly ineffective. The shield skill was barely sufficient to fend off local bullies, and the crossbow could only take down insignificant foes. His initial excitement gave way to frustration. Remembering he had received a weapon for clearing Stage 2, Kang eagerly checked his inventory and drew a sparkling sword. Holding it aloft, he felt a surge of power and chuckled. "This is so awesome. I've always wanted to hold a sword like this." But the system, dampening his spirits, promptly noted, "This is just a shabby longsword." Disappointed once again, Kang's mood soured as he moved on. As he progressed, Kang mused about the legendary sniper, Carlos Hathcock, who had successfully assassinated a general from 1.4 kilometers away after a grueling 3-day crawl. Kang held immense respect for such feats. Having crawled for 10 hours himself, Kang finally arrived at a village, vibrant with the sound of beating drums and guarded by tribal people. He began plotting his strategy for assassinating the chieftain. Surrounded by many small huts, Kang surmised that the chief would likely reside in the largest one. As he lay camouflaged in the grass, having crawled for the past 10 hours, discomfort marred his stealth. His pants, damp with urine, clung to him stickily, attracting grass and insects that nipped painfully at his skin. Rain had soaked him thoroughly, adding to his misery. Lost in strategic thought, he was oblivious to the approach of a guard. Suddenly, the guard materialized before him, and Kang's breath hitched as he braced for capture. Looking up, he saw a towering, muscular guard staring down at him. Kang feared his mission was doomed, but unexpectedly, the guard began to urinate, obliviously using the spot Kang occupied for relief. The guard, unaware of Kang's presence, continued as Kang felt the warm stream inadvertently entering his mouth. Rage built within Kang, his body shaking as he endured this indignity. Reminding himself of the trial at hand, Kang mentally repeated, "I must endure. No matter what, I must endure." This stage was designed to test his patience and endurance, and he was determined to uphold his resolve. However, the guard began to playfully manipulate the stream, splashing Kang's face directly. This act shattered Kang's strained composure. His patience snapped, and fueled by indignation, he sprang up and began a furious pursuit of the guard. "I'm going to cut your little pee off," Kang roared. The guard spun around in shock, meeting the visage of Kang's face still dripping with urine. With a primal yell, Kang charged, sword in hand, ready to confront the guard. In a single, decisive motion, Kang struck down the guard, cleaving him in two. A satisfied smile crossed his face as the guard's body slumped to the ground. However, the sound of the confrontation had drawn the attention of other guards. Soon, over 100 of them encircled Kang, ready to retaliate. Realizing the gravity of his situation, Kang decided to embrace his fate dramatically. "I might as well deliver the line I've always wanted to," he thought. Summoning all his strength, he bellowed, "Come at me, you sons of bastards." As the guards rushed towards him, an unexpected notification from the system informed Kang that he had unlocked a new skill named Lion's Roar of Rage. The specifics of the skill were unknown, but its immediate effect was not enough to prevent the guards from overpowering Kang and leaving him at the mercy of the wild animals. The following day, fueled by rage, Kang seized his ghillie suit and roared, "I will kill every one of you one by one." His scream was so powerful that it triggered another system notification. His Lion's Roar of Rage had evolved into a skill called Degrade. This advanced ability diminished the stats and morale of nearby enemies while clearing any debuffs affecting him. With renewed determination, Kang flung his ghillie suit into the air and charged at the guards, shouting, "I will kill each and every one of you damn bastards." He had observed that the guards dispersed in the morning to hunt, presenting an opportunity to isolate and eliminate them individually. Using this strategy, he methodically took down the guards, advancing towards the tent. Once inside, his expression twisted into a sinister grin. Kang hissed, "I am here, you bastard Gurkhan chieftain." But the scene that unfolded before him was unexpected. A corpulent, complacent chieftain sat flanked by two mages, their fingers wreathed in spellwork. At the chieftain's command, the mages unleashed their spells, enveloping Kang in a force that felt like a tenfold increase in gravity. Immobilized and bewildered, Kang struggled against the magical constraints until he recalled his lion's roar of rage, hoping it could turn the tide of the battle. Taking a deep breath, Kang unleashed a defiant scream. "Die, you ugly fat ass!" The magical debuff lifted instantly, much to the chieftain's astonishment. Wasting no time, Kang charged forward, a triumphant smile spreading across his face. "I am inevitable," he declared, before cleaving the chieftain in two. The system promptly notified him that he had completed Stage 3 of the tutorial. Kang had not only gained a new ability, physical regeneration ranked at B, but also set a new world record for the fastest completion of Stage 3, earning him the title the Undying League, which boosted his stats by 1. Pausing to reflect, Kang thought, "I completed Stage 3 in just 2 days. It had taken him weeks to conquer Stage 2, and Stage 1 had been an utter debacle. Am I really a genius?" He wondered, his spirits soaring at the prospect of breezing through the next stages, envisioning himself as a legendary knight triumphantly standing over a slain dragon. Reality, however, was quick to dampen his dreams. A month had elapsed, and Kang was still grappling with Stage 4. One morning, while preparing breakfast and watching the news, he abruptly awoke screaming. His sister, Ju-hee, barely reacted. His outbursts had become a routine annoyance. She sighed and muttered, "There he goes again with his nonsense," as she turned off the gas stove. "If you keep waking up screaming like this, the neighbors will start thinking I'm murdering you every morning," she remarked dryly. "What happened today, Kang? Did you slip, hit your head on a rock, and die?" Ju-hee teased, poking fun at his repeated failures. Just then, a thunderous voice boomed from Kang's room. "I cleared it." "You idiot!" Ju-hee, still groggy, turned toward the noise. Suddenly, Kang emerged, his entire body wrapped in a radiant red aura, shouting, "I just tore them apart." Initially, Ju-hee didn't take Kang's proclamation seriously, but as he stepped into the light, her expression shifted to one of shock, bewilderment, and confusion, witnessing his transformed aura. She was speechless for a moment, but then Ju-hee exclaimed, "What happened to you?" Before her stood Kang. His physique enormously transformed. His body had swollen to twice its usual size, his muscles now bulging impressively. As they sat down for breakfast, Ju-hee, still perplexed and concerned, couldn't help but ask, "How did you become like this?" Kang visibly irked and exasperated. Kang retorted, "This tutorial won't let me live in peace. It's turned my life into a nightmare. All that's fine, but day by day, you're starting to look more like a thug," Ju-hee remarked, still trying to comprehend the change. Kang replied with a hint of sarcasm, "Wow, thanks. My own sister thinks I look like a criminal." Their conversation quickly devolved into the typical banter siblings often find themselves in. After some time adopting a more serious tone, Kang began to explain that Stage 4 wasn't as challenging as it appeared. The theme of Stage 4 was leadership, he said. All I had to do was lead a party, enter the dungeon, and destroy its core. Simple, right? Initially, his party members appeared cooperative and helpful. However, it wasn't long before disputes erupted over leadership, resource management, and loot distribution. Kang eventually took charge as the leader, his task facilitated by the intermediate body regeneration ability he had acquired after clearing Stage 3. This B-grade skill allowed him to automatically regenerate from any cuts, burns, or fractures using mana, making it easier for him to maintain his leadership. Curious, Ju-hee asked, "If everything was going so well, why did it take you a month to complete Stage 4? At her question, Kang's demeanor darkened, and he fell silent for a moment. Then, with a voice heavy with frustration, he revealed, "The trouble began that night. Every time I fell asleep, my so-called allies would turn against me." Kang's voice grew louder and more agitated as he recounted the betrayals. The betrayal was a repeated offense despite Kang's efforts for the group. His party members would treacherously murder him in his sleep, taking turns that were anything but vigilant. This cycle of betrayal continued for an entire month, fueling Kang's frustration to its boiling point. During a heated discussion, Kang's anger erupted so forcefully that he accidentally spilled food all over Juhai's face. Annoyed, Juhi wiped her face and snapped, "Eat first, then talk, you maniac," taking her advice. Kang quieted down and began to eat more calmly. After a few moments of silence, Juhi, curious, asked, "So how did you finally manage to complete stage 4 today?" At her question, Kang burst into laughter, the kind that bordered on madness, his voice echoing around the room as droplets of saliva flew from his mouth. His eyes blazing red, he exclaimed, "I simply eradicated all the annoying pests and moved on the scene, then cut to the previous day." Kang was with his party members who, true to form, began to bicker. But this time, Kang's patience reached its limit. Veins throbbing on his forehead, he exploded. To hell with the system, to hell with leadership. His roar, amplified by his lion's roar skill, was so intense that it nearly burst everyone's eardrums. Amid the chaos, the witch who had betrayed him most frequently began to berate him, demanding to know his actions. But Kang, pushed past the brink of reason, brandished his sword menacingly at her, and declared in a deep, menacing tone, "From now on, you will all follow my instructions. If anyone so much as itches without my permission, I will cut them from head to toe." Another party member, a yellow-haired man named Pido, attempted to interject. "Are you insane? Why should we listen to you?" Before Pido could finish, Kang struck him repeatedly with fierce punches. The assault was brutal. Pido's face swelled, his teeth shattered, and he was left sobbing, unable to utter a single word. He simply nodded, acknowledging the other's shock, and added ominously, "If anyone even itches without my permission, you will beg me to let you die." Galvanized by his own threat, Kang then proceeded to rampage through the dungeon. He had run through it 29 times, memorizing every path and corner. Within a mere 8 hours and without any rest, Kang methodically slaughtered every monster, swiftly reaching and destroying the dungeon's core. Immediately, the system acknowledged his victory, congratulating him on completing stage 4 and rewarding him with the Ring of Strong Mind, a B-grade item. His status window updated to reflect his new level 15, with enhanced attribute strength at 17, agility at 16, endurance at 17, and magic at 15. After 30 dungeon raids, Kang had amassed a trove of loot: armor, weapons, pearls, and magic stones, though he was uncertain of their uses. The Ring of Strong Mind granted him immunity against any mental attacks. Despite the significant power he had amassed within the tutorial, none of it seemed applicable in the real world. Post-stage 4, Kang's physical form matched his virtual self, muscular and imposing. However, attempts to utilize his powers outside the tutorial proved futile. At that moment, Kang was performing push-ups, his physique robust and imposing. Completing his 1000th one-handed push-up, he paused, beads of sweat evaporating from his heated body. Wiping off the sweat, he pondered, "When will I finally complete stage 8? As he mulled over this, his phone rang. Initially dismissing it as likely just another advertisement, his attention snapped fully when he read the message and felt the ground shake. A dungeon had broken out, unleashing a goblin coincidentally right in front of Juhai's workplace. Without a moment's hesitation, Kang dashed to his house, frantically searching for a weapon to confront the new threat. He frantically scanned the room, his agitation mounting as he muttered curses under his breath. Finally, his eyes landed on a kitchen knife lying in the basin. Seizing it without a moment's hesitation, Kang dashed out of his house. Soon, he was standing outside Juhi's office, taking a deep breath to steady himself. With a dramatic flourish, he yelled, "It's been a while, you sons of chicken lollipops," his voice carried, drawing the immediate attention of all the goblins in the vicinity. Kang felt a twinge of disappointment, thinking, as expected, "I still can't use my skills outside the tutorial." The goblins, drawn by his shout, charged towards him with murderous intent. Yet, instead of fear, a thrill of excitement surged through Kang. Mockingly, he taunted them, "Why do you sound like monkeys?" Despite his outward bravado, Kang remained cautious. This was, after all, his first real encounter with monsters outside the virtual confines of the tutorial. He briefly pondered whether these goblins were stronger or weaker than those he had faced in the tutorial, but pushed the thought aside as he tightened his grip on the kitchen knife. In a swift, fluid motion, he decapitated a goblin, his smile one of grim satisfaction. As the goblin's body slumped to the ground, Kang addressed the horde with a chilling grin. "In the first stage, killing just 4 or 5 goblins wasn't enough to satisfy my hunger. I won't find peace until I've slain over 100. He withdrew the knife from the goblin's skull and methodically began dispatching the others, one by one. Meanwhile, inside Juhi's office, the workers scrambled to fortify the entrance, barricading the door with any furniture they could muster. Amidst the chaos, laughter rang out from outside, and heavy footsteps ominously approached the building. Fear gripped everyone, Juhi included. Her phone buzzed with a new message from Kang, inquiring, "Are you still in the office?" The text, under the circumstances, seemed almost eerily calm amidst the pandemonium unfolding around them. "If you are, then stay there," he wrote. Juhi's brow furrowed in confusion. Is Kang really coming here, she wondered. But before she could further contemplate, the maniacal laughter intensified, and the sound of heavy footsteps approached rapidly. Suddenly the door burst open as Kang, smeared with goblin blood, made a dramatic entrance, shattering the barricade of heavy furniture. Standing there with a disturbingly satisfied smile, he declared, "Juhi, your big brother is here like a cold-hearted psychopath reveling in his chaos." The room fell silent, everyone frozen for a moment, staring at Kang in disbelief. They struggled to recognize the deranged figure before them, and even Juhi, witnessing Kang in such a state, felt a wave of embarrassment wash over her. Her colleagues exchanged glances filled with confusion and disbelief. Kang, a kitchen knife nonchalantly draped over his shoulder, surveyed the office as if still trying to grasp the reality that Juhi worked in such a place. Before he could speak further, an older man, clearly the department head, lost his composure. He yelled at Kang, "Who the hell are you? And how did you break down the door to get in here? At this rate, all the monsters." Kang cut him off with a polite apology, explaining that he hadn't meant to use so much strength. "I'm sorry, I couldn't control my powers and accidentally used too much force. But don't worry, I've already sent all the goblins outside straight to hell." The employees were stunned, their eyes darting to the dead goblins scattered lifelessly on the floor, struggling to process the surreal scene. Before anyone could respond, Kang chuckled lightly and added, "I saw a lot of goblins in the alley in the nearby building, so I'll take care of them too with that." He casually rested the goblin's sword on his shoulder, turned, and walked away with a confident swagger. Glancing back with a smirk, he quipped, "If I don't kill those goblins, I won't sleep peacefully tonight." The scene shifted to show Kang, bandaged up, with Juhi tending to his wounds. Clearly annoyed, Juhi chided him, "We're almost out of saline. If you knew you'd get this hurt, why did you go out and fight all those goblins just to show off?" Inspecting his bandages, shrugged. "Right now I'm just an ordinary guy. I can't use the skills I had in the tutorial. So yeah, I got a few scratches, but it's no big deal," he replied nonchalantly. Juhi's face turned serious as she warned him, "If you can't use your abilities here, dying in these stunts might mean dying for real." Kang brushed off her concern with a smirk. Yeah, but you have to admit, it was pretty cool, right?" Cracking a reluctant smile, Juhi conceded. "Yeah, it was cool." Their playful sibling banter resumed. Leaning in with a mischievous grin, Juhi whispered that all her friends had fallen for Kang after his daring act. "They're driving me crazy, begging me to introduce them to you," she said. Hearing this, Kang, perpetually single, blushed and let his thoughts wander. However, as night fell and he drifted to sleep, he was abruptly welcomed to Stage 5 by the familiar voice from the tutorial. "The theme of this stage is wisdom," announced the voice. Kang puzzled over what wisdom could mean in this context, but was quickly distracted by the appearance of a group of voluptuous, intriguing women around him. Their seductive voices asked, "Are you the succubus?" Kang was utterly confused. The system then clarified that the objective was to identify and eliminate the succubus hiding among these women. The twist, however, was that once he identified the succubus, he would become its first target. As the word succubus triggered his imagination, Kang envisioned a captivating, vampire-like woman, reminiscent of those he'd seen in games, known for draining men's vitality. Surrounded by these alluring women, his single status suddenly felt like an invitation to indulge his deepest desires. Just as he was about to get lost in his fantasies, a young, attractive girl approached him, snapping him back to the task at hand. With a seductive tone, the young woman inquired, "What do you think? Who among us is the succubus for the first time?" Kang was engaging with a girl who was not only attractive but also conversational. But he blushed, stuttering, "I." Before he could elaborate, a notification from the system informed him that his ring of strong will was currently blocking a mental attack. Kang instantly deduced that this charming girl was the succubus, attempting to ensnare his mind. As evening settled and he sat by the campfire, Kang reflected on his journey through the tutorial. Stage 1 had been a fiery ordeal, Stage 2 a fierce goblin fight, Stage 3 involved being degraded in the mud for hours, and Stage 4 was a hellish month-long group project. Chuckling to himself, Kang thought, "Finally, Something enjoyable after all that hardship. The same man who had been cursing his fate was now ironically thanking the heavens, murmuring, "Thank you, God, for some fun with these beautiful women." His laughter took on a lascivious tone, but he quickly reined it in, reminding himself, "I need to stay composed. If the succubus catches on, it's all over." Aware that the succubus targeted only men and that he had mental protection, Kang realized she was likely manipulating the other male NPCs. Deciding to rest, he planned to ally with the female NPCs the following day to defeat the succubus. However, upon waking, Kang found himself not in the tutorial but back in Juhai's office. He awoke with a shout, and the room erupted in cheers, praising him for his heroic defeat of the goblins. Even the male workers expressed their admiration, sharing the good news that the army had arrived. But Kang's thoughts were elsewhere. He was seething, infuriated by the succubus's near success in manipulating him. He muttered about her realizing he was onto her and attempting to eliminate him as he slept. Just then, the ground vibrated with the rumble of army trucks. The building shook as the military, armed with Alaska 47s, M416s, and machine guns, began decimating the goblin horde outside. On the rooftop, a collective cheer erupted among the bystanders, but Kang felt a disquieting sense of foreboding. A sinister aura pervaded the atmosphere. His gaze sharpened as he scanned the chaos below where the army was engaged in combat with the goblins. Something felt amiss. His eyes locked on a figure, a red goblin wielding a spear, adeptly dodging every bullet. In a fluid motion, the goblin decapitated a soldier, causing panic to swell as the troops responded with a barrage of gunfire. However, their efforts were futile. The goblin remained unscathed, its rage intensifying, eyes glowing a demonic red. With a fearsome roar, the goblin launched itself at the army vehicles, annihilating everyone in its path with ruthless efficiency. Kang watched the carnage from above, a sense of helplessness washing over him as the scene continued to deteriorate. The formidable goblin then turned its menacing gaze directly towards Kang, piercing his soul with its malevolent stare. This grotesque creature had single-handedly destroyed 3 army trucks, with only one remaining. As soldiers scrambled for their lives, desperately calling for reinforcements, the goblin finished its rampage, standing atop the last truck with a vile, triumphant smirk, appearing as if it thirsted to drain its adversaries completely. In such moments one couldn't help but think of legends of heroes known as goblin slayers, for when a creature exudes such malevolence, ordinary measures simply do not suffice. The soldiers, gripped by terror, struggled to maintain their composure, hands quivering as they aimed their weapons. The red goblin, with a mighty leap, hurtled towards them. A soldier, in a last-ditch effort, fired his M416, though he sensed the futility of his actions. As the red goblin was about to strike down the soldier, Kang made his move, stepping into the fray to confront the monstrous foe. Without hesitation, Kang lifted a hefty chunk of concrete and hurled it directly at the goblin's face. The impact sent the creature reeling backwards. The American soldiers paused, struggling to process the sudden turn of events. They wondered who, or what, had just intervened on their behalf. Kang climbed onto the truck with a dark, confident smile. The soldiers, already rattled by their encounter with the red goblin, felt a fresh surge of apprehension at the sight of Kang's formidable expression. In a panic, one soldier yelled, "It's a new monster attack. Fire it!" Will Kang, taken aback, shouted in return, "I'm human. Are you insane?" Upon closer inspection, the soldier realized his mistake, recognizing Kang's human features beneath the intimidating demeanor. Sheepishly, the soldier apologized, mistaking Kang for one of the awakened beings summoned for support. However, Kang's focus was elsewhere. He saw the red goblin beginning to recover. His decision to aid the army wasn't born out of heroism or altruism. Rather, Kang realized that if the army fell, the goblin would undoubtedly target him next, endangering not just himself but also Juhi. Determined to leverage the army's resources, Kang jumped off the truck and inquired, "Do you guys have any tear gas?" The soldiers confirmed, but they lacked a spare gas mask for Kang. Unfazed, Kang declared, "I don't need a mask." The soldiers, puzzled but prepared, got ready to deploy the tear gas on Kang's signal. Meanwhile, Juhi was internally panicking, baffled by Kang's audacious decision to engage without any supernatural abilities. But Kang was ready for the confrontation. Face to face with the formidable red goblin, he couldn't suppress a thrill of anticipation. "I've slain countless goblins, but none have offered the challenge I've sought," he mused, feeling a genuine excitement for the first time. Finally, a worthy adversary. "Today I truly become the Goblin Slayer." Sensing Kang's challenge, the red goblin's irritation mounted. Just as the tension peaked, A soldier hurled the tear bomb. It exploded near the goblin, who howled in pain and thrashed wildly, tears streaming from his eyes. Kang's eyes stung as well. But the discomfort was trivial compared to what he had endured in his relentless battles with goblins. His resolve hardened, ready to seize this moment. Goblins, notoriously sensitive about their eyes, were at a severe disadvantage. Meanwhile, Kang, having endured torturous ordeals and unimaginable pain, had grown almost inured to such discomfort. His reaction was a stark contrast, laughing maniacally in anticipation of the battle. Charging towards the formidable goblin, Kang ignored the tears streaming from his eyes and nose, and launched into a relentless assault. The goblin, overwhelmed by the stinging pain, could do nothing but stand defensively, its eyes tightly shut. However, Kang soon made a disheartening discovery. Despite his fervent attacks, the goblin remained unscathed. Observing from a safe distance, the soldiers began to murmur among themselves, questioning if this seemingly madman was actually one of the awakened they had heard about. Amidst their speculation, a voice from behind chimed in, "I thought I was the only one sent here for support. Who is this guy?" This newcomer watched Kang's futile efforts with curiosity. Growing increasingly frustrated, realized his sword was badly dulled, and the goblin's skin was far tougher than he had anticipated. Lacking his usual powers, he found it nearly impossible to inflict any significant damage. Just as Kang grappled with his predicament, a blur of motion whisked past him, a figure darting with incredible speed, launching a swift and fierce attack on the red goblin. Taken aback by the sudden intervention, Kang noted the stranger's agility. This guy is fast, no doubt about it, he thought, intrigued and somewhat relieved by the timely assistance. Despite the newcomer's rapid assault, the red goblin remained unmarked. Catching Kang's gaze, the fast man asked, "Are you an awakener? If so, we don't have time for pleasantries. We need to take this creature down." Kang nodded in agreement, and together they initiated a coordinated strike against the goblin. Kang attacked from behind while the fast man engaged from the front. Yet, despite their efforts, the goblin's hide proved impervious. Kang recognized the extraordinary resilience of the goblin's body. Ordinary attacks simply weren't effective. As Kang's sword neared destruction, he noticed a pointed axe nearby. He sprinted towards it, seizing the weapon. The fast man observed and called out, "I've got the speed, but lack the power to inflict damage." Kang, focused and undeterred, grasped the axe with a determined expression, resolved to end the confrontation. Kang understood the red goblin was merely biding time, defending itself until the effects of the tear gas dissipated. He needed to identify a vulnerability quickly. The goblin's body was as hard as iron, but perhaps there was a softer spot to exploit. His eyes and mouth seemed potential targets, but the goblin's defenses were robust. Then an idea struck him. Kang charged at the goblin with the axe, yelling as he approached. In a fluid, decisive motion he struck. The red goblin froze, caught off guard by the unexpected pain and intense, confusing sensation. The fast man watched in disbelief at Kang's audacious move. With a grim smile, Kang executed a brutal technique, reminiscent of a fantastical ninja's deadly hand strike, but with the axe, plunging it deep into the goblin. "Well, this is one hell of a way to pop your first cherry," Kang remarked darkly, satisfaction in his voice. "I'll show you what true hell is," Kang promised, standing ready as the goblin reeled from the impact, the battle reaching a new, fierce climax.